হ্যালো এন্ড ওয়েলকাম। আমি অভি। আজকে আমরা স্টুপস টু কনকারের একটা ট্রিকি জিনিস আমরা আলোচনা করব, সেটা হচ্ছে যে whether Stoops to Conquer is a comedy of manners or an anti-sentimental comedy or a mixture of both, and if it is really an anti-sentimental comedy, then what is the so-called sentimental comedy? So let us first discuss these points before going to the main drama. And Oliver Cromwell, the orthodox Puritan leader, he abolished monarchy and he came to the power, and he declared himself as the Lord Protector. And as he is of puritanical temperament, he banished all kinds of dramatic activities, even if it was drama of Shakespeare or Ben Jonson or figures like that, because he believed that any kind of dramatic performance is spreading the virus, the epidemic of indecency, licentiousness, immorality. So Milton, Oliver Cromwell, to some extent Andrew Marvell, they projected themselves as a kind of moral police, and they thrust upon the people that from today no dramatic performance would take place, and strict moral pattern, strict moral principle was imposed upon the British public. Now see that nothing too much, nothing extravagant is not fit, is not suitable, is not acceptable. Nothing extravagant is not acceptable. You have to be always in the sense of compromising, which Oliver Cromwell, Milton, Andrew Marvell did never that. So dramatic performance was stopped, and it was a baronage from 1642 to 1658. In 1658, Oliver Cromwell was killed, and in 1660, the brother of Charles I, that is Charles II, the brother of beheaded King Charles I, Charles II, he attacked England in 1660, and the monarchy was restored, and that is we call the Restoration. And mind that only for that brief span of time, that is from 1642 to 1660, there was only parliamentary power, and only in the time of British history there was no monarchy. You all know that. Now Charles II, who was whose mental makeup was set while he was in exile in France, so he was quite fashionable, open-minded, and the first thing he did is that when he came to the power in 1660, he lifted all the ban on dramatic activities. Now it's a kind of spring. If you push the spring for a long time and suddenly release, it will spring longer than its usual length. The same thing happened. The immorality, licentiousness, indecency for which the dramas of previous playwrights were banned, that indecency, licentiousness, immorality, and illegal relationship, caricature, all these things become predominant theme in the Restoration drama, especially in Restoration comedy of Etheridge, Wycherley, and Congreve. They left no stone unturned in their comedy of manners, in appealing to sensuality, sexuality, immorality, and initially they were hugely accepted. Because people who were starving when such kind of entertainment was provided in plate for them, they simply gobbled them up. So this is the story of restoration comedy of manners. Restoration comedy of manners we call it because restoration comedy, it is a totally sophisticated urban affair, and it portrays the story of the urban aristocratic people who insisted so much on manners. That is why it holds a mirror to the urban society, and it is called restoration comedy of manners. The restoration comedy, that is in latter 17th century, was full of vitality and comic mirth. The prevailing motive was cynicism. The plays are centered on various amorous intrigues, peculiar love affair between a teenager hero and heroine with an old man and woman. So all these things were presented. Not only that, artificial lightning, women actress, all these things were introduced in their plays. So there is no limit to that kind of immorality. They are inspired by Ben Jonson's comedy of humor, French dramatist Molière, and ultimately they were truly witty as well as sensual in appeal. The Puritans, who are still not extinct, they revolted against the restoration comedy of manners. One of the prominent Puritan of the time, Colley Cibber, he wrote a treatise, A Short View of the Profaneness of the English Stage, in which he exposed all the vices and corruptions and the impact, the vicious impact of this drama on the mind of British people. So they tried to revolt against the prevailing restoration comedy of manners. And out of these circumstances, before the end of 17th century, a peculiar kind of comedy, sentimental comedy, appeared on the English stage. Now, sentimental comedy, actually from modern perspective, is originated from a mistaken view of comedy. It emphasized so much on virtue and prudence that they turned drama into a kind of pulpit, into a kind of church lecture. Now see, what Aristotle says that comedy is a deviation of the norm. If there is nothing absurd, if there is nothing odd, humor will never be originated. The situation in sentimental comedy are more pathetic than comic. You may compare it with Pamela or Virtue Rewarded, the novel, which hardly we can call from modern perspective a novel, rather a religious book where Pamela the servant will teach her master regarding a virtuous life. It's a kind of pilgrim's progress. They become dull and monotonous. They are like lifeless puppet acting on the stage, just expressing what the playwright had to say, or better to say, what the playwright had to preach. There is no distinction, my dear friend, between Colley Cibber or Richard Steele, his descendant. There is no difference, my friend, between Colley Cibber or Richard Steele and a religious preacher. Colley Cibber wrote some plays in the 18th century like The Careless Husband. Richard Steele wrote a number of comedies like The Funeral, The Lying Lover, etc., The Conscious Lovers. And we can also give reference to Hugh Kelly and Richard Cumberland. In Cumberland, the West Indian, every issue is obscure. Every opportunity to evoke laughter is carelessly denied. The sentimental comedy is a death knell to the comic spirit, to the immense development of comedy of 1660, restoration comedy of manners. England still then, they wholeheartedly welcome this kind of pulpit preaching, this kind of sentimental drama of Collie Silver and Still. Because they believe that art is not for art's sake. Art is for life's sake. That is, the main purpose of the art is to instruct you to live a better life. At this peculiar juncture, Oliver Goldsmith, the son of an Irish Protestant clergy, he makes his presence felt in British dramaturgy. It is believed that he has a degree of medicine, but it is not can clearly be verified. Though there is reference in the prologue of Stoops to Conquer that Oliver Goldsmith is a doctor. The first comedy of Oliver Goldsmith rang a bell of change. His Good-Natured Man was produced at Covent Garden, his first comedy, in 1768, and after that comes his masterpiece of 1773, that She Stoops to Conquer. We might refer to important playwright of this anti-sentimental era who tried to revive at least some spirit of wit and fun and rescued that English comedy from being totally perished. The two important names, of course, is Oliver Goldsmith and number two is Sheridan. Sheridan's The Rivals, The School for Scandal, they are quite a masterpiece and revived the spirit of comedy by mocking at the prevalent hypocrite sense of morality and sentimentality. Now, Goldsmith wrote an essay in order to counter Collie Silver's essay on the view of the profaneness of the English stage. The name of Goldsmith's essay is a comparison between laughing and sentimental comedy questions, where he says whether the exhibition of human distress is likely to afford the mind more entertainment than that of human absurdity. He was of the opinion that the success of the sentimental comedy was due to its novelty or to their flattering every man in its favorite foible. He, however, thought that such plays are deficient in vis comica, that is, they are not sufficient enough to create fun and laughter, which should be the basic aim of comedy. We may refer to Dr. Samuel Johnson, the literary master of this period, who says that no man was more foolish when he had not a pen in his hand, or more wise when he had. And Garrick writes later in his epitaph that here lies Nolly Goldsmith, for shortness called for Noll, who wrote like an angel but talked like poor Paul. You can see that when the bell of change was rung by Sheridan and Goldsmith, they were immensely welcomed by the contemporary public as well as the literary masters. So Oliver Cromwell and Sheridan started a crusade against the prevailing sentimentality. They revived the comedy of manners, spirit of Etheridge, Wycherley and Congreve, sans its immorality. That is, there is a kind of, you can say, a wrapper of decency in their drama. একটা শালীনতার মোড়ক তাদেরকে দেওয়া হয়েছিল নাটকগুলোতে, যদিও স্পিরিট, উইট, কমিক্স এলিমেন্ট এসব ক্ষেত্রেই, সোশ্যাল স্যাটায়ার এসব ক্ষেত্রেই এরা রিস্টোরেশন কমেডির যে স্পিরিট তাকে এরা ফিরিয়ে আনতে চেয়েছিলেন। গোল্ডস্মিথ, depressed with that current state of affairs in the stage, wrote an essay on sentimental comedy in 1773. He considered that sentimental comedy is quite akin to tragedy, as it has removed all kinds of humor, absurdity, deviation from norms, or peculiar relationships. If there is no peculiarity, how can comic spirit can be evoked? In his essay, A Comparison Between Laughing and Sentimental Comedy, Oliver Goldsmith wrote, quote unquote, "Since the first origin of the stage, tragedy and comedy have run in distinct channel and never have encroached upon the provinces of each other. Terence, who seems to have made the nearest approaches, always judiciously stops short before he comes to the downright pathetic. All other comic writers of antiquity aim only at rendering folly or vice ridiculous, but never exalt their characters into basking pomp or make what Voltaire humorously calls a tradesman tragedy." So what Oliver Goldsmith says that from antiquity, from old ancient days, tragedy and comedy are like two rivers. They are flowing into different directions. And the classical masters never attempted to cross over their boundary and intrude upon other. That is, tragedy is tragedy, comedy is comedy, and both can never be mingled. But that peculiar experiment, that peculiar hybridism happened in the age of Colley-Cibber, or still against which Sheridan or Stoops, against which Sheridan and Oliver Goldsmith revolted. Now you have to keep in mind that Oliver Goldsmith, besides writing those prose, he also wrote a poem. He also wrote a poem called Retaliation, where he exposes the character of Richard Cumberland, the most well-known writer of the genre of sentimental comedy. So you can see that it's a kind of all-round revolt against the prevailing low spirit. Now Goldsmith first produced his The Good-Natured Man in 1768, but the audience did not take it, because the audience always needs some time to adjust themselves with the changes. Goldsmith was upset because of the poor reception of his anti-sentimental comedy and the people's taste for that odd, peculiar, weeping sentimental comedy. False Delicacy, a play by Hugh Kelly, which was staged at the same time in Drury Lane, was much more obviously successful as sentimental comedy. So he was quite upset. Stoops to Conquer was produced in 1773, but it was a grand success because people, they always need some time to adjust. It looks quite convincing, comic, and of course entertaining. Art is for art's sake. An actor, Cumberland, in his memories, give an account of the first performance of the Stoops to Conquer. But the friends of Goldsmith even are not sure about the dramatic success. But Dr. Johnson was one of the spectators of the first performance, and he said, quote unquote, "I know no comedy for many years that had exhilarated an audience." Now see, Dr. Johnson is such a crucial figure. You have to remember that Dr. Johnson was the man who left the so-called metaphysical poets into obscurity for many years. And getting a certificate from Dr. Johnson, a certificate from appreciation, means a lot for any dramatist. However, Goldsmith was not sure whether how much people would accept the play, and that's why a prologue was attached to Stoops to Conquer. And always remember that prologue to Stoops to Conquer was not written by Oliver Goldsmith. It was written by David Garrick, a renowned actor of the time, and delivered by Mr. Woodward, a comic actor who expresses his dissatisfaction with the prevailing sentimental comedy of the time. In his essay on the theatre, or a comparison between laughing and sentimental comedy, Goldsmith believes that the classical formula of comedy, that is, as you remember that Aristophanes in ancient era wrote the comedy The Frogs, so that spirit also should be taken into consideration, and the classical formula of comedy has been applied. He believed that the purpose of Stoops to Conquer is to give a humorous exhibition of the follies and foibles of men and manners, as well as to correct them a bit, if it is possible, through laughter, not satire. His comedy, second comedy, Stoops to Conquer, bears close resemblance with Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost or Much Ado About Nothing, which is put in the Restoration context. Ben Jonson remains a guiding force throughout the career of Oliver Goldsmith and Sheridan. We will go in details regarding other aspects of the play, but let me conclude with the confusion regarding the title. The play has two titles, Stoops to Conquer and The Mistakes of the Night. The first one is the main title and the second was subtitle. There is a reference to the main title of the play in the words of Miss Hardcastle. "I never knew half his merit till now. He shall not go if I have power or ask to detain him. I will still preserve the character in which I stoop to conquer." So that very much phrase, I stoop to conquer, which was borrowed in the title, was spoken in the play by Miss Hardcastle, which is important from objective questions. Now, Goldsmith, when finished writing and approached the famous club of Dr. Johnson, Goldsmith has entitled the play actually "The Old House, a New Inn," a kind of antithesis. The old house, a new inn. But Dr. Johnson says, quote unquote, "We were all in labor for a name to Goldsmith's play. Various names were suggested by the members of the club. For instance, Joshua Reynolds, the celebrated painter, suggested the name of Bell's Stratagem in imitation of Farquhar's The Buke Stratagem, but they were not accepted. At the last title, Mistake of the Night, which is now given an alternative subtitle of the play, was decided upon by the members of the club. Goldsmith, however, he was a little bit confused about the title. He came across, remember, he came across a line in Dryden's The Hen and the Panther, but kneels to conquer and stoops to rise. The phrase in The Hen and Panther is that but kneels to conquer and stoops to rise. And probably from that hint of Dryden's Hind and Panther, he took the title, which suits the basic theme of the play. So, good luck, and mind that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but you have some promises to keep to be settled in life. So, miles to go before you sleep. Don't take a rest until the goal is achieved. Do or thank you and best of wishes.